In this video lecture, we will study about balanced and unbalanced forces. Okay, so what is a balanced force? If the resultant of all the forces acting on a body is zero, then the forces are called balanced forces. Okay, so let's consider an example. Let's say we have an object and there are a lot of forces acting on the object like F1, F2, F3, F4. Okay, so if I sum all them up, like if I have the condition in which F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus F4 is equal to 0, if the sum of all the forces is 0, this is important, then I will say this object is under balanced force and the object will not move, right? Because the forces are balanced. So if sum of all the forces acting on an object, the resultant of all the forces, so it doesn't mean like F2 has to be 0. It's like all the sum of every force together it has to be 0 for the object to be in balanced force. Okay, let's look at one more example here. You see two guys trying to pull this pile of books, right? Let's say this person is applying the force F1 and this one is applying the force F2. Okay, if F1 is equal to F2 magnitude wise, right? So we are looking at just magnitude, and direction is opposite. So if F1 is happening in the west direction, then F2 is happening in the east direction. So if the direction is opposite and the magnitude is same, then the F1 plus F2 would be 0 because there is, and since there is no net force on the object, okay, then this pile of books will not move and this would be under balanced force. Okay, so it's important. Let's look at what is unbalanced forces, right? So if the resultant of all the forces acting on the body is not 0, so that is important, right? If the resultant of all the forces is not 0, then the forces are called unbalanced force. So if I go with my previous example, when there was multiple force acting on the object, so right, F1, F2, F3, F4, if F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus F4 is not equal to 0, so this not equal to is more important. Just remember that if the resultant of all the forces is not 0, then the object is under unbalanced force, and because it's not 0, the object will move. So another example, right? This pile of books now is pulled by this person, and this guy is applying force F1 and this big lady is applying the force F2 in this direction, this is in this direction, and let's say F2 is greater than F1, the magnitude of that, right? Then this pile of books will move in the direction of the lady, right? And the reason is because it's under unbalanced force. Okay, so remember this, the resultant of all the forces acting on a body, if it is not 0, then the body is under unbalanced forces. Okay, let's look at one more example here. So you can see here, so we have two scenarios. In one scenario, all these people are applying the same force and the resultant is 0. So resultant force is 0. Okay, so that's why the net is not moving. In this one, the resultant, okay, is force is not 0. Okay, and that's because either sometimes one person applies more force, sometimes another person applies more force. So that's why this net is moving all over the place. So this is an example of unbalanced. Sorry about that. This is an example of unbalanced. Okay, and this is an example of balanced. Yeah, I hope this makes things clear.